In 1867, the United States bought Alaska from Russia. But there's a hidden story behind this famous deal that could have completely changed the Pacific region. Picture Japanese being spoken in Anchorage, Shinto shrines scattered across Alaska's wilderness, and the rising sun flag flying over military bases in the Aleutian Islands. How would this have changed the power balance in the North Pacific? What would it have meant for World War II and the Cold War? This tale starts with a puzzling diplomatic message, recently found in the Russian Foreign Ministry's archives. It talks about a secret offer to buy Alaska, not from the US, but from an unexpected country. This offer came from a nation that had kept itself isolated from the world for hundreds of years. So why did Russia, with its huge empire across 2 continents, decide to sell its American land? And who was this mystery buyer, ready to purchase a frozen wilderness so far from home? The answers to these questions change how we see 19th century global politics and the future of the North Pacific area. Russia's motivation to sell Alaska. In the 1860s, Russia faced a tough problem with its huge Alaskan territory. Keeping control of this far-off land was getting harder and harder. With fewer than 400 Russian settlers in Alaska, the empire couldn't really establish a strong presence there. This left Alaska open to threats and hard to protect, which worried Russian officials. The Crimean War of 1853-1856 had hit Russia hard, draining its money and weakening its military. This forced Russia to rethink its plans for faraway colonies like Alaska. After the war, Russia couldn't properly support or defend its North American lands, and it was feeling the pressure financially and strategically. Making things worse, the British Empire was growing more powerful in North America. This threatened Russian interests, as Britain could potentially take over Alaska's borders and mess up Russian trade in the Pacific. The threat of British power near their vulnerable Alaskan territory became a big concern for Russian leaders, making them consider their limited options. As these problems piled up, Russian officials started thinking about selling Alaska. This wasn't just about money, it was a strategic move. Russia thought that if another country owned Alaska, it might help balance out British power in the area, which could protect Russian interests in the long run. Russia knew it couldn't defend Alaska well, and this played a big part in their decision to look for a buyer. In the end, Russia decided to sell Alaska because of several reasons. It was hard to govern such a distant territory. Recent wars had left them short on cash. Other countries were expanding their power, and selling to an ally could have strategic benefits. By selling Alaska, Russia hoped to cut its losses and improve its position against rival powers in the Pacific. But as Russia was thinking about this big decision, a surprise player entered the picture. This new development made things more complicated, challenging what both Russian and American diplomats thought they knew. This third party changed the negotiations and brought a new element to the upcoming sale of Alaska, setting up a diplomatic game of chess with big consequences. Japan's surprising bid for Alaska. While Russia thought about selling Alaska, Japan unexpectedly joined the conversation. In the 1860s, as the US looked like the top buyer for this huge territory, Japan was quietly making moves that could have changed the power balance in the North Pacific. Japan's interest in Alaska lined up with big changes happening at home. The Meiji Restoration, starting in 1868, marked Japan's shift from being closed off to becoming a modern industrial country with big plans. As part of this change, Japan wanted to spread its influence and become a major player in the Pacific. In 1867, Japan secretly reached out to Russia about buying Alaska. They had a few reasons for this bold move. Japan saw Alaska as a way to push back against Western powers in the area, especially Britain. By getting a foothold in North America, Japan hoped to create a buffer and secure its position in the Pacific. Japan was also building up its military, especially its navy. Owning Alaska would have given Japan more resources and a strategic advantage to support these growing military plans. If Japan had gotten Alaska, it would have seriously changed the power dynamics in the Pacific, giving Japan access to important natural resources and ports. We don't know all the details of the negotiations, but it's clear Russia took Japan's offer seriously. Japan even talked about getting the Aleutian Islands, showing they had big plans for expansion in the North Pacific. In the end, though, Japan's attempt to buy Alaska didn't work out. The country was still in the early stages of modernizing and didn't have enough money or international influence to pull off such a big deal. The US, with more money and interests in the Pacific, ended up being the better buyer for Russia. As this little-known piece of history wrapped up, the stage was set for a big decision that would shape North America and the Pacific. The US buying Alaska would have huge effects, while Japan's failed attempt showed its growing ambitions in the region. Conclusion: the Alaska saga in the 1860s shows how national interests and global power shifts intertwined. Russia, struggling financially and strategically, wanted to sell its hard-to-manage distant territory. Japan, newly open to the world and eyeing expansion, saw a chance to gain a North American foothold. The United States, fresh from civil war, recognized Alaska's strategic importance for its Pacific ambitions. This story highlights the changing international landscape in the 19th century Pacific. Japan's rise challenged the old colonial system, while the US buying Alaska was a key step in becoming a world power, reshaping North Pacific politics. It's fascinating to think about what might have happened if Japan had bought Alaska. During World War II, they could have used it to attack the US mainland, possibly changing the war's outcome. After the war, Japanese-owned Alaska might have affected NATO's formation or influenced Cold War Pacific strategies. These historical possibilities connect to today's Pacific politics. As Russia, Japan, and the US continue to interact in the region, the Alaska Purchase's impact lives on. Current issues like the Russia-Japan dispute over the Kuril Islands and debates about US military presence in Okinawa echo the power struggles that shaped the modern Pacific. Understanding this pivotal moment helps us make sense of current US-Japan-Russia relations and where they might go as the global landscape keeps changing.